This week, Donald participated in a rather chaotic interview with Fox Noticias, where he struggled, as he usually does, to make any sense. He started off with an incredibly cringeworthy moment that I am going to which I'm going to affix a trigger warning because he tried to speak Spanish, which is offensive in more ways than one. So you have been warned. This is hard to watch.
Vamos a hacer América grande otra vez.
America grande otra vez.
Oh my God, that was alarming. Was pro tip. Now, I always appreciate when people try to speak another language because Americans are notoriously incapable. We're almost all monolingual, and for some reason, we think that's better than being able to speak more than one language. It's very weird. However, Donald, pro tip: don't try to speak another language until you've completely learned the first one. You need to be fluent in English before, at your advanced age, you start bandying around Spanish phrases. And the body language was just deeply alarming. So rein yourself in a little bit, man. Anyway, once he got into the real questions, the lies being, in other words, once he was speaking English, where it's so much easier to be fluent, not just in the language, I mean, to the extent that he is, but with the lies, they became quite an avalanche of lies once he got into the subject of immigration. He started off with straight up falsehoods about Mr. Abrego Garcia and his case, claiming that Donald is winning in the courts. Watch.
We won that case 9-0. Mm-hmm. And basically, that's really a decision that will be made by the government of El Salvador, because that's where he's from, El Salvador. So that's a decision up to El Salvador. But it's interesting because we won that decision 9-0 in the Supreme Court. And if you listen to the news, you wouldn't know
that. No and no. Okay, the way the rest of us in the reality-based community remember it is that the courts actually ordered Donald and the executive branch to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia to the United States, something that the Trump regime is refusing to do. And now they may well be held in contempt of court by the judge who's ordered those rulings. On top of that, Donald is now removing all responsibility from himself, because that's what he does, claiming that it's El Salvador's decision, which is absolutely absurd and offensive. We learned just this week that the Trump regime has been paying El Salvador $6 million to house anybody Donald deems deportable, no matter how illegal such deportations remain. So whose choice is it really? Well, actually, it's the choice of the judiciary branch, still, at least if the Constitution is still operative, a co-equal branch of government along with the executive and the legislative branches. Donald, in case you're taking notes, you might want to pay attention. That's how the government is set up. There's this tripartite system. I know tripartite, it's a hard word. Maybe if I said it in Spanish, it would be easier for you to understand. But I'm going to spare everybody my horrible Spanish accent. So the judiciary, co-equal branch of government, also, and this is the cool part, designed as a check and balance on executive overreach and legislative authority. How cool is that? The judiciary is making this decision. So by pretending that El Salvador has the power, and then El Salvador saying, hey, we don't have to pay attention to the United States Supreme Court, and then by Donald saying, he's out of the country now, we don't have any jurisdiction. Well, guess what? That's a lie. Those are all lies. And if things go according to plan, because, really the judiciary doesn't really have an enforcement mechanism except for this one thing: holding people in contempt of court and punishing them accordingly. So I have that to look forward to, hopefully. Donald also, once again, brought up his new favorite word. It's not quite as archaic as groceries, but for him anyway, it has a nice ring to it, and it is the word homegrowns. Watch.
We use it for violent criminals, our own violent criminals.
I call them homegrown criminals. I
Yes,
mean, the
homegrowns.
the ones that grew up and something went wrong and they hit people over the head with a baseball bat. We have, and push people into subways just before the train gets there, like you see happening sometimes. We are looking into it and we want to do it. I would love to do that.
What a terrifying place his little head, the inside of his little head must be. But I'm actually beginning to think that these are either fantasies he harbors, or, and I mean, I think I would know this, but maybe not. I mean, our family did keep a lot of secrets, but I'm beginning to think that maybe he was hit over the head with a baseball bat. It would explain so much. But yes, Donald is digging into his plan to deport United States citizens and hold them in El Salvadorian prisons. And I don't mean United States citizens who became citizens after, while they were adults or, through the process. He's talking about quote unquote homegrowns. That means people who were born here. And I say, listen, we're shredding the Constitution anyway. The First Amendment is soon to be a thing of the past, as is peaceful protesting. That's the right to assemble peacefully. What else? What else? Oh, yeah. We already got rid of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which says that people who commit insurrection are no longer eligible to be elected to higher office. That's gone. So why not go after Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, which claims that anybody born in this country is a citizen of the United States, and they have all of the rights and privileges that come with that. And you know what else they have? They have exactly what all of these people who've been illegally detained and deported and disappeared and incarcerated have. They have their habeas rights. They have the right to due process. But, homegrowns, they're coming for you too. That'll be fun. We know that this is all blatantly illegal, but when does that ever stop Donald from doing whatever he wants to do? I mean, it is absolutely insane that this person of all people, this convicted felon, this adjudicated rapist and business fraud, this man who incited an insurrection and stole highly classified, highly sensitive government documents from the American people and did God knows what with them, that he is making such decisions, unconstitutional, anti-American, illegal decisions to deport whomever he wants. Why? Well, because 74 million of us decided that this horrible human being deserves that kind of power, and the fascist Republican Party abdicated all of their constitutional duties and handed them over to Donald Trump, and the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court said, yeah, this is the guy we want to have imperial power. We want him to be immune from prosecution. We want him to be able to commit whatever crime he wants, as long as it's under the umbrella of official acts, because who the fuck knows what that means. Yeah, this is the guy. This is the guy. We want to have that kind of power. Who cares about the Constitution? Because that is what is going to have to happen. Donald Trump is breaking the law every single day. He's a recidivist who has never been held accountable, which is why we're here. He will continue to break the law. He will continue to commit unconstitutional acts. And just because the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority may or may not sign off on it doesn't mean that it's legal and constitutional. It just means that corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court is even more corrupt than we could possibly imagine in our worst nightmares. Nobody seems to know who's at risk, who's safe under Donald's deportation plans, which remain fluid. He likes to keep his options open. A man who immigrated to the United States asked Donald during this interview if he is at risk of deportation under Donald's erratic plans. Watch this.
Well, from an actual standpoint, no, but from a practical standpoint, yes. I look at this man, I say, this is a guy that we want to keep. I mean, they'll probably take heat for saying it. Everybody wants everybody. That's a good man I could see it just by looking at that question. So, and I don't know that he said, is he supposed to be deported? No, he didn't say that.
No, and I think that's the question people have.
Good.
Right now, it's just illegal criminals.
Yeah.
Will and perhaps those who came during the Joe Biden 4 years, because they obviously weren't well vetted.
Who is that woman? Like, where do they find these people? And also, what is an illegal criminal? I don't know. People can't be illegal. no matter how much you hate them. But yes, of course, that this is a guy we want to keep, says Donald Trump. The only way to get on, all you need to do to get on Donald's good side is to kiss his ass. I mean, if I'd rather be deported. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. But anyway, I mean, I'm a realist. But yeah, just the extent to which people are willing to debase themselves for that is kind of shocking, although it shouldn't be anymore. But it's good to know that the deportation process is entirely discretionary, which is which is to say that it's entirely up to Donald Trump's discretion and whom he considers a good or a bad person, because he is such a good judge of character. But let's be real. Donald only said this because, as mentioned, that person is a supporter of his. If it were somebody like me, somebody like you, anybody who'd criticize him, what do you think the answer would have been? I think I know, because Donald doesn't have a moral compass. All he has is a way to judge whether and to what extent people value him. People put him on a pedestal. People think that he of all people is somebody that they want to give all of their loyalty to, suck up to, and bow down to. That's his moral compass. Not that you could call it that, but that's it. I mean, don't get me wrong. He knows the difference between right and wrong, which is why he should be in prison for the rest of his life, because, he can't get off on an insanity plea. He knows the difference between right and wrong. He just doesn't think that such things apply to him because he's better than we are in his little mind, obviously. Listen, before we go further, please hit like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're pushing for 400,000 subscribers, and as independent media, your support helps us reach more people to keep this going. After moving on from lying about immigration, Donald started lying about Jeffrey Epstein, who used to be a really close buddy of his. Long interviews clearly are not Donald's thing. Are short interviews? Are short sentences? I mean, if we're being realistic. Because without any prompting, he started to go completely off the rails and I'd say he was lying, but how could we tell? Because he wasn't making any sense. When asked about the Epstein files, he claimed that he had already released them along with the JFK files. Watch.
Yeah, I would say just release it. He was somebody that was, I guess you'd have to say, notorious. And I would say release it. And I did release the full Kennedy files. People said, well, maybe not everything. And I said, if anybody has a problem, go to the office. We gave an office address, and they can look at every single piece of paper we have and other files.
Nope, not true. He claimed he would release the files, but, nothing really came of it. Now, what is stopping him from releasing these files? Well, comedian Jimmy Kimmel voiced what some of us have known all along and what many of us have been thinking. Quote, Donald, as you know, was a good pal of Jeffrey Epstein, so he was likely not thrilled to be asked about him during an interview with Fox Noticias in Espanol. You'll be surprised to learn he took an El Paso on that question, unquote. Oh, the puns. The puns. So this Kimmel is just sort of tongue-in-cheek here. But why does Donald claim that he released the files when he did not do so? I have a feeling, and again, I don't know, this is just informed speculation, there's probably a lot of stuff in those files he doesn't want anybody to see. But what it continues to amaze me is that a lot of people in his inner circle have seen those files, know what's in them, knows what kind of relationship Donald Trump had with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and what kind of association he had with the horrific crimes they committed against girls and young women. And yet, nobody's speaking out. That's the kind of people who are in charge now. Donald then went from speaking about Epstein to pivoting to January 6th, defending the participants because, day ending in Y, and they need all of our support after having been pardoned and released from prison. This was quite the segue into talking about his favorite supporters, the people, the criminals, the hard criminals who stormed our Capitol, attempted an insurrection, and in some cases, attempted to murder our Congress people and their staffers.
As you know, the January 6th and all of that, we freed the people. They were treated so badly. There's never been, there have been some pretty bad instances, but there's probably never been anything like what happened with the people from January 6th, who were largely, and there's always exceptions, but largely great patriots for this country. And so many people were happy with that. I did that, and I let them out. I gave them their freedom. They were treated worse than murderers. They were treated, people murder, they don't even go after them.
Yeah.
They know they're there, they know where they are, where to pick them up, they don't even pick them up. They went after these people so violently, and so I took care of that.
Yes, they went after them so violently by following the law and giving them all of their due process rights and allowing them to have the best representation they could find and giving them a trial and juries and verdicts. So one thing he said, not all of them were great patriots. Well, you released all of them. So I guess, broad brushstrokes. There's another line I want to reiterate, quote, "I let them out. I gave them their freedom. They were treated worse than murderers," unquote. Can you imagine what the Capitol police officers who were viciously, viciously attacked that day, some of whom later lost their lives, some of whom are still recovering. Can you imagine what they must think when they hear this person, the President of the United States, say that about the people, those vicious, totally anti-American people who almost ended their lives on that day while those police officers protected our Capitol, our freedoms, our democracy, and our government? I can't. It's shocking to see the way Donald speaks out about January 6 criminals, people who actually committed crimes, in contrast to how he treats the fathers and husbands that he's deporting, all of whom, for all we know, have committed no crimes. Donald goes off the rails one final time, making completely nonsensical complaints and threats about the January 6 committee. Wow, I love it when people just can't help but live in the past. Watch this.
They burned everything, and then Biden gave them all apart. And these are Congress people. These are people that are in Congress, not respected members of Congress, but they're in Congress. Yeah. If you did that in a civil thing, but think of it, they burned, deleted, and destroyed every single document after a year and a half, because like the person that said, I grabbed this massive Secret Service agent around the neck, and I was rebuffed, and then I went to the other one, and I think he was like this big karate guy, and I went over there, and I had friends that say, don't have it changed, it's so cool, I said, no, I just want the truth. That's right. But they burned all that information, and I think she recanted, I've heard, she recanted her, and after 2 years, she said, no, it didn't happen. Isn't it a shame, though, huh? Isn't it a shame? I view that as being so egregious. And then what did Biden do? I don't know, him or the AutoPen. Whoever operated the AutoPen was really the president, because I don't know.
Wow. You know what's a shame? That he's allowed to say anything publicly. It's quite grotesque, and I'm kind of over it. At least for today. He makes no sense, and on those few occasions he does make sense, he just lies. Basically, he's saying that the January 6th committee burned all of their proof of the crimes that were committed on January 6th, which is what they were there to uncover. So that doesn't make any sense. And then he's very, very upset that Biden preemptively pardoned the members of the January 6th committee, which Biden only did because Donald has been threatening them for years. And these are people who've received death threats, who have had Secret Service protections rescinded by Donald. I mean, he seems that he's upset because he's unable to prosecute them, but at the same time, he's the reason. Because Biden had to pardon them out of concern for their safety. So even when Donald makes no sense, it's clear that he is the most vindictive person who ever walked the planet, which again just reminds us what a very, very bad idea it was to give him any power at all, let alone all of it. Please take a second and like and share this video. It'd be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.